Welcome. What we're going to learn today, it's a Sicha of the Rebbe. Sicha means literally a talk by the Rebbe, which means I'll be as brief as possible with the introduction, which means some concept, an idea that the Rebbe shared in a public meeting, usually on Shabbos, usually in the seventh day, etc. This particular one comes from the year 1977, which the Rebbe actually explained within a Hasidic discourse. And I'm not going to explain the deep difference between a Hasidic discourse and a talk. It's basically different levels of Kedusha, sanctity, that the Rebbe is sharing with us. And actually, the way it worked, very briefly, is that the Rebbe spoke probably for 5 hours, 6 hours. People memorized, literally, what the Rebbe said in those 5 hours. And then after the Shabbos, or after Yom Tov, they sat down and they wrote down what the Rebbe said. And after, sometimes really past a long time, sometimes years, literally, they prepared, there was a group of people, they prepared what would be published. They gave it to the Rebbe. The Rebbe actually put notes and in and out, and then he said, okay, go publish this on my name. So what I was saying is that not necessarily these particular words were pronounced by the Rebbe exactly as we have them, but certainly the Rebbe checked it, again put notes and said, this is my talk, basically. I even recall a story I heard from a rabbi that one of those that actually worked in the Rebbe's editing things and memorizing things, etc. that once they showed the Rebbe what they had prepared to be printed, and the Rebbe rejected it. The Rebbe said, no way, this is what I said. Like, you can't just write what I say. You have to, work on it a little bit, and then it's okay, because the way you talk, it's way different than the way you write. It's a normal thing. So if you're going to print something on writing, you have to work on it a little bit, not just what I say. So again, we're going to learn a talk, quote unquote, now we understand a little bit better what this word means, a talk by the Rebbe. This talk actually was pronounced in a completely different time of the year, like towards the end of the year, but they printed it in Parshas Noach. Parshas Noach, of course, is one of those parshas that talk about the whole humankind, because there were no Jews in the times of Noach. And in this particular one, if I had to summarize everything in just one phrase, which would not be a good thing to do, but anyway, let's do it. I would say like this: the completeness, the fulfillment of a non-Jew is through a Jew. That's what it means. That's what the Rebbe is going to actually tell us, which in itself, it's an important message on the side of the Judaism. Why? Because you go to Jews, and the Rebbe, of course, was talking to Jews, and you tell them, hey, why are you not helping the rest of the world to become better people? You just close on yourself, and you just take care of yourself, and the rest of the people, I don't care. They're non-Jews anyway. What do I care? No, you got it wrong. You got it wrong. The whole world is going to be elevated, and of course, it's going to be a better place for the coming of Mashiach, etc. The whole world, but it depends on you. That's on one of the messages to the Jews, directly to the Jews. But there's another one to the non-Jews. You can check, you can learn, you can grow, etc. But you have to know that the real growth is through a Jew. Maybe an example, we're going to learn why. Just bear with me. Maybe an example of this would be like those people that learn, that are really smart people. There are many of them, really, really smart people. And they learn by themselves, whatever subject it is. I don't know, medicine or whatever. They learn, and they really know the subject. But you know what? We want to go to the next level. You need a master. You need a teacher. Somebody that is really higher than you. I remember many years ago, one of my children wanted to learn music. And where I lived in La Plata, there was a master, like one of those big ones, like really, really a music master, big one. And, my inexperience, I asked him, would you teach my son music? Like really the beginning, piano, really, really beginning. And I love this guy. I haven't seen him in a while, but it's a very special person, really a music master. And he told me, look, I'll be honest with you. Take your son to somebody that is going to learn them, teach them, the most basic things and the most, etc. And when he already knows music, bring him to me. I'm going to take him to the next level. Like, okay, you can learn by yourself. It's fine. You can know many, many things and really develop yourself, etc. But there are levels. And to get to the next level, you need somebody that is already over there. And I'm not saying that Jews are over there that really know. No. That's not what I'm saying. What I want to say is like this. They have the potential. The Jews have the potential. You're going to know why. The Jews have the potential to reach a higher level. Does it mean that they are in a higher level? I have to be honest and say no. There are so many Jews. Most of the Jews actually don't know Judaism, don't know Torah, don't learn Torah, don't keep the mitzvahs. I don't like it, but it's the truth. So I can't be dishonest with myself. And there are many Jews that know. Okay, so in potential, yeah, they can reach very high levels. Who reached those levels? I don't know, but doesn't really matter. But the point is, again, the fulfillment, the real coming to your objective, or the objective why you were born of a non-Jew is through a Jew. And that's a message for the Jew and for the non-Jew, both. Now let's start. I'm not going to read the whole text. And to be honest, I prefer much more the Yiddish than the English. Not because I understand Yiddish better than English. The truth is that I understand English better than Yiddish. However, the original one is in Yiddish. The structure and the words, and I prefer much the original one. So I'm just going to read a few parts, and I'm going to show you in the English one that we have on the screen where we're holding. So let's start. First of all, the Mishnah. The Mishnah, I'll just point out a few things and words and phrases around. The Mishnah is a book of oral Torah. I know it sounds like a contradiction. A book of oral Torah doesn't make any sense. If it's oral, why it's a book? Okay, it's a whole story about it. And the very brief idea is that when the time came around the year 200 of the Common Era, when the time came that the Jewish people were forgetting the oral tradition, somebody, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi, that was his name, a great sage in his times and in all times, etc., he wrote down most of the things of the oral Torah, and he wrote the Mishnah. And in the Mishnah, there's a part that is called Pirkei Avot, the ethics of our fathers. There's a whole big argument between our sages. What's the objective of this tractate of the Mishnah? It has all kinds of things, very interesting behaviors and things, etc. Within those things comes an interesting phrase, which is actually composed of many parts. I'm not going to teach all the parts, just the ones that are important for us. Beloved is man. Man means like all the humankind, everybody. And of course, I'll just repeat this. I said it so many times, but just in case, man, woman, everything is the same. We're talking about the human being. So, beloved is man who was created in the image of God. An additional love was made known to him, as it is the fact that man knows that he was created to the image of God. That's an additional love, something more that God gave him, because it says, the verse says, God made man in the image of God. Okay, very nice. Now, what does it mean, men? Does it mean Jews and non-Jews? Maybe only Jews? Maybe only non-Jews? What are we talking about? So our commentators, they argue this, definitely. Some opinions say it's just talking about Jews. But the Rebbe is going in this particular talk through the opinion that says, wait a second, men means everybody, Jews and non-Jews. Everybody was created in the image of God. So parentheses, even if one at some point heard here, there, whatever, that Jews consider non-Jews like animals, I'm sorry, you're wrong. That person is wrong. Because animals were not created in the image of God. Like the verse doesn't say that. And man was created in the image of God. So it's a completely different thing. And we're not better animals, developed animals. Forget it. Evolved. No. We're human beings. Not an animal. If a person wants to behave like an animal, okay, he's going to be accountable up there, whatever, after 120 years. But we're not animals. We're human beings. And non-Jews were also created in the image of God, and God informed the non-Jews that they were created also, Jews and non-Jews, in the image of God by telling them, "B'tzelem Elokim asa es Adam." God made man in the image of God. Okay. With this explanation, we can understand that when the Mishnah says Adam, man, really means every single human being. And then the Mishnah, this text that we are analyzing, continues and said, oh, the Jewish people, we're going to call it Israel in this particular translation, the Jewish people have other things, like they were given the Torah. Okay, very nice. Something that not necessarily happened to the non-Jews. So we can understand easily the continuation of the text in this book called Mishnah, Tractate, Pirkei Avot, etc., Ethics of Our Fathers. Why it makes a difference between men and the Jewish people? Because it's talking about different types of people. Everybody is a human being, but this one is a Jew and this one is not a Jew. Okay, now, why would the author, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, that's what it's called, that's what is usually called, Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi was his name, Rabbi Yehuda was his name, Hanasi means the leader, Rabbeinu HaKadosh, our saintly Rebbe, Rabbeinu HaKadosh. Why did he introduce in the Mishnah that was originally written for Jews, why did he introduce something that apparently is not for Jews? Like, okay, tell me the Jews are whatever, nice people, good people, whatever you want to say. Okay, they were given the Torah, oh, very nice. What do I care that the non-Jews were also created in the image of God? Like, what difference does it make? If you're writing a book for Jews, talk to Jews. If you're writing a book for non-Jews, talk to non-Jews. Why do you mix up things? Why do you mix up things? So the Rebbe answers simply, because the Rambam lived in Spain, year 1100s. He passed away 1200 and something. So the Rambam writes, when he writes the laws of the non-Jews, Bnei Noach, the Rambam writes that Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe, our Rebbe, he was commanded to compel all the people of the world, that means every single human being, to keep the 7 commandments of Bnei Noach, of the sons of Noach. So, okay, there's a teaching in a Jewish book for Jews. Why? Because the Jews have to go and teach the non-Jews these laws. So you have to tell the Jews, hey, you're not teaching a dog and a cat. Wait a second, you can't teach a dog and a cat to behave properly, whatever. You're teaching a human being and not just a regular human being. Yeah, wait a second. He was created in the image of God. So you should be respectful and you should teach him, etc., whatever the message is. Okay, the 7 laws. Okay, go learn it somewhere else. And to the point that there's a specific feeling, so to speak, of being beloved by human being. I mean, God loves every single human being because he created them, every single human being, to his image. And he actually informed everybody in the Torah, in the text of the Torah, I created, says God. Of course, I created man in the image of God. Okay, very nice. However, the Rebbe goes a little bit further, so to speak. Let's go to the second chapter, so to speak. In the second chapter, the Rebbe tries to go deeper in what does it mean, the image of God, which is the word actually tselem over here. What does it mean in Hebrew, the image of God? What is that? And the Rebbe brings an explanation from his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe, and his father-in-law says that this idea of tselem, the image of God, that of course God doesn't have any images, so what does that mean that man was created in the image of God? That means something that we're going to call nefesh sichlis, the intellectual soul. Intellectual soul. This is found also by non-Jews. Therefore, from there we can see, just a second, I lost the place. Therefore, that's why the Mishnah brings 2 particular ideas. Look at the text over here. There's a repetition of language in the words of the Mishnah. On one hand, the Mishnah says, beloved is man that he was created in the image of God. That goes on the nefesh sichlis, the intellectual soul of a regular human being, non-Jew. And then he goes an additional love. The second part, additional love was made known to him that was created in the image, that is talking about two types of tselem, two types of images of God, so to speak. One of them is the intellectual soul in the general human beings, and then there's the intellectual soul of a Jewish people. It's two different things, two different types of intellectual soul that, of course, the objective is to try to understand what's the difference, and how does it express itself, etc. So now, first of all, we said everybody was created basically the same. Everybody was created in the image of God. But in that case, why is the Mishnah like separating into two parts this idea of tselem? So again, the previous Rebbe says there are two types of tselem. There are two types of image of God, so to speak. Now, according to this explanation that the previous Rebbe offered, again, that there are two types of tselem. One is of the non-Jew and the other one is of the Jew. The Rebbe asks a question, a simple question, not such a deep question. And the question is like this: why is it necessary to put, again, into a book that talks to Jews, the idea that there's a difference between the tselem, the image of God, within the Jew, when compared to the image of God within the non-Jew? Like, what difference does it make? In the words of the Rebbe, why is it important in this thing that man is choviv, is beloved, because he was created in the image of God, which is talking to Jews, so to speak? Why is that important when we're talking about a Bnei Noach, a non-Jew, that has to keep the will of God, because that's what we learned from the Rambam, from the idea of the 7 laws, etc., etc. Why is it important to mention this difference when talking about Jews? Like, you could just mention that man was created in the image of God and just move on. Like, why make this difference and inform this difference to the Jew? There's no need for that. Even if you want to tell me that the Jew has to teach the non-Jews, you can teach me this, you can tell me this information in a different way. You don't need to make a difference between the Mishnah itself in two different paragraphs. Beloved, this man is beloved, it's stronger love, etc. Why is it necessary? So I'm just going to jump a few parts in order to make it easier to understand. Let's move on to the 4th chapter. I assume that you learned the text, and I assume that even if you didn't do it, you can do it later. And then hear the class again and try to understand. Let's move on. What's the difference between the intellectual soul of a Jew and the intellectual soul of a non-Jew? In order to understand this, the Rebbe goes into a definition that the previous Rebbe mentioned. And the previous Rebbe says like this: look, the intellectual soul of a Jew strives for something spiritual, looks for something spiritual, like wants to move on, go on with life in a higher way, so to speak. Within the intellectual soul of Israel, it feels a spiritual refinement, like it's part of the nature. It's not because of the merits of the Jewish people. No, that's the nature God created. And even though it is human intellect by nature, and usually human intellect is actually self-centered, however, still it has a unique attachment to spiritual refinement. That's the definition the previous Rebbe gives on what is the soul of a Jew, the intellectual soul of a Jew, which is not the case with the intellectual soul of a non-Jew, which is coarser understanding. What does that mean? It doesn't mean that there's fools. No way. There are so many, even more than Jews, very intellectual and very intelligent non-Jews. We're not talking about that. We're talking about what's the feeling that this soul strives for. What's the way this soul understands things. As is explained in many places, and you will see the difference in a minute, it's very interesting. External wisdoms, I'll explain what this means in a minute, often leads a person to a sense of self-importance and even crudeness. What is it talking about? What is external wisdoms? In the world of the Torah, external wisdom means anything else that is not Torah. Call it mathematics, call it astronomics, call it whatever way you want to call it. Usually leads a person to a feeling of self-importance, a feeling of egotism, like me. I understand. I know. That's the nature of intellect. We're not talking about something bad, because that's the way intellect functions. I understand things, and you can understand the same thing in a different way, completely different way. It's just your intellect, quote unquote, against my intellect. Okay, we can argue, but the real nature of intellect is to understand things the way I get it, the way I want, and that's fine. And intellect can even find, and we don't have to go so far, like 80 years ago in Europe, intellect took the Nazis, Imach Shemam, their name should be erased, etc. Intellect took them to a place where they had to kill, they understood that they had to kill certain amount of people because they were Jews or black or this or that. And that's where intellect, like pure intellect. Why? Because intellect understands things the way it wants. According to my ways, according to my understanding, according to my axioms or whatever, and it's pure intellect. That's why the Rebbe is bringing over here the idea of the previous Rebbe, that there's a certain sense of self-importance and even crudeness that intellect, pure intellect, can lead to. Okay, that's the difference, and we'll see a deeper explanation of this in a minute. That's the difference basically between the intellect of a Jew that has this kind of spiritual refinement and attachment to spiritual refinement, like striving higher, and the intellect of a regular person, a regular human being, might be very intelligent, doesn't matter, has some sense of self-importance. However, the Rebbe is not satisfied with this explanation. Why? The role of intellect is to clarify truth. Tell me the real truth of something. That's pure intellect, without any inclination, any bias, so to speak. And therefore, the thing of intellect is to strive higher. The spirit, like the verse says, spirit of man ascends upwards, different than an animal that descends downward. So how can it be that there is such a thing of intellectual soul going low, going down? We just explained the difference between, in these two paragraphs, the difference between the intellect of the Jew strives high, the intellect of the non-Jew goes down. Wait a second, that goes against the idea of intellect. The very main thing of intellect is to go up, clarify truth, go higher. So why are you saying that this intellect it's different? Why would be the difference? Intellect is intellect. What do you mean? A Jew, non-Jew, what do I care? Do you have a brain or not? That's the only thing I should be asking. What's the difference? Why is there a difference? So the Rebbe explains like this. The intellectual soul, even of a non-Jew, its purpose is not emotions. What does that mean? There's a very strong relationship between mind and emotions, mind and heart. The mind should be actually guiding the heart into the right place. Sometimes it doesn't do a good job, whatever. That's what the mind should be doing. The thing of intellect by itself is not, its purpose is not to guide the heart. You could have intellect just by itself. Even if it's not applicable, a person might learn something because it's interesting, because he wants to develop the brain. It is intellect for the matter of intellect itself. So again, why there should be a difference between the intellect of a Jew and the intellect of the non-Jew, and the intellect of the non-Jew causes a sense of egotism and coarseness. Why? I don't get it. This is what the Rebbe is asking on the explanation of his father-in-law, the previous Rebbe. And the explanation is as follows. I'm not going to follow the Yiddish because it's going to be so difficult. Let's just go with the English. The intellect's ability to strive higher than itself is connected to the person's disregard for themselves and the personal inclinations. Self-nullification. When is real intellect inclined towards the truth? When it leaves itself on a side. When you're able to do this, then you really get intellect, pure intellect. And because the mind of the intellectual soul deals with worldly matters that are inherently egotism and self-existence, therefore arises in the mind a sense of egotism and self-existence. What the Rebbe is explaining with this, basically, and he's going to mention briefly later in different words, but the idea is like this. Why was a Jew created and why was a non-Jew created? And the Rebbe mentions this in other talks also. What's the purpose of each one of them? And the idea is that the purpose of a Jew is to strive high, connect to God. The purpose of a non-Jew is to have a righteous and moral, ethical world. You hear the difference? The difference is that one points up and the other one, not in a bad way, points down. Why am I saying not in a bad way? Because actually, the Jews can only live in this world when the non-Jews prepare the world properly. They take care of the world. So everybody can live here. And we can bring good God down and everybody is going to enjoy God's revelation, etc., etc. Very nice. For that, you need a nice world. Let's call it just a nice world, whatever. Who does this job? Non-Jews. But because of the fact that they're more related to the world, therefore, the intellect might get influenced by this and lose this sense of self-nullification. On the contrary, when you deal with the world, you start feeling yourself. I like food, I like sleep, I like alcohol, drugs, blah, 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 whatever you like. Because you're dealing with this, you get influenced by this. You get in touch with these things, as the Talmud says, when a person deals with a dirty person, when you actually fight or whatever, with a dirty person, you get dirty. There's no way of going out of that. And basically, this is the idea. And the Rebbe explains like this: the fact that the intellectual soul of the Jew also deals with worldly matters, it's human intellect, and has indeed a unique attachment, like the previous Rebbe says, to spiritual things, is not because the Jew has a divine soul and is above generals. It's not so much from itself, but because the Jew has a divine soul. And the divine soul generates this idea of self-nullification. What is the Rebbe saying over here? Look, if you deal with intellect by itself, pure intellect, and intellect would not be, it's a theoretical case, and intellect would not be influenced by the world, well, the intellect of a Jew would be the same exact intellect as a non-Jew. Same thing. Just intellect, pure intellect. But the truth is that the intellect of the non-Jew is related to the world because that's his task in the world, or her task, whatever, in the world, to prepare the world for the coming of Mashiach. How do we do that? By being ethical, by being moral, by sharing morality and ethics, etc., through the whole world. That's their job. Fine. And the Rebbe explains in a different place, not in this particular talk, that with that we can understand, with this idea, we can understand why the Jew, when he makes a transgression, there are different types of punishments applied to them. And when a non-Jew makes a transgression of the 7 commandments, etc., the only punishment around is death penalty. Why? If a Jew steals, he has to give it back. If a non-Jew steals, you have to kill him. Today we don't kill anybody, don't worry. But what's the difference? Why? And the answer is very simple, according to what we just learned. If the purpose of the non-Jew in the world is to prepare the world for Mashiach, is to prepare the world to be an ethical place, a righteous place, etc., and he is going against that, he is going against righteousness and he goes against morality, etc. Why? Because he's stealing, he's killing, etc. He lost his reason of being. Why do you exist? There's no reason why you should exist, because you're going against your own self. That's why he gets death penalty. Like, look at it in a different way. It's not that the Torah says, if you do this, you got that, I'm going to give you this. No, it's an automatic thing. It's an automatic result of the person losing the reason why he exists. You exist here to bring morality, and you act unmorally. That's it. You lost the reason why you exist. There's no reason why you should exist. That means death penalty. That again, today it doesn't apply, but that's what it means. Death penalty. So what do we have until here? The Rebbe is going to show this in the Mishnah, what we just explained. But what do we have until here? We have basically two types of tzelem. We have the tzelem of the Jew and the tzelem of the non-Jew. The image of God of the Jew, the image of God of the non-Jew. We explained that the image of God is the intellectual soul. What does that mean? It's a part of the soul that takes care of intellect, pure human intellect. Not more than that, not less than that, etc. No connection to any divine things or anything. And the previous Rebbe said, wait a second, the intellect of the Jew goes up, the intellect of the non-Jew goes down. Why is that? Intellect is intellect. What's the difference? And the answer that Rebbe gave, wait a second, the Jew has an additional thing. God injected in the Jew something more. And that something more, which we call it divine soul, it's explained in different places. It's over here, the divine soul, that generates in the intellectual soul of a Jew that it looks up. Is it by nature of the intellect of the Jew? Like, ask it from a different point of view. Are Jews more intelligent than the non-Jews? It's a stupid question. I'm sorry. You got it wrong. We're all human beings. What do you mean? There are stupid people and they're Jews, and very smart people and they're non-Jews. And the other way around also. So what do you mean? It doesn't make any sense, your question. We're just human beings. But wait a second. Why is the intellectual soul of the Jew functioning differently? Because he has a divine soul. Okay, we can argue hours. What's a divine soul? We can talk about it. Okay, that's fine. It is not the point of this particular talk. But the point is that he has a divine soul. And that affects his intellect. Now, let's move on to this paragraph over here. The Rebbe is going to explain what's the difference between the tzelem, the image of God that a non-Jew has, and the tzelem that a Jew has. The beloved, in the language of the Mishnah, the belovedness of the sons of Noach stems from the intellectual soul, the tzelem that is within them. This paragraph is like not difficult, but it's a little bit subtle. So pay attention. Again, why does God love the non-Jews? Because they have a tzelem. Wow, you were done in my image, says God, of course. You were done in my image, I love you. Again, the belovedness of the sons of Noach stems from the intellectual soul, the tzelem, that is within them. Now, what about the Jew? It's different. It's the other way around. What about the Jew? The belovedness of the Israel of the Jew, which is connected to the tzelem in them, is not because of the tzelem. It's the other way around. Because they are loved, then again Hashem gave them tzelem. It's the other way around. It's exactly the opposite. God loves the non-Jew. Why? Because he has a tzelem. Now, God loves the Jew. Therefore, I'll give him a tzelem. It's the other way around. Now, with these ideas, we can understand what the Rambam brings. And now the Rebbe is going, again, to take this to the next level, so to speak. Does it mean that the non-Jews are, so to speak, whatever, quote unquote, doomed? That's it. No way to elevate yourself. No. And the Rebbe is going to say it very clearly. Very interesting. This is the explanation of the Rambam's ruling that Jew must compel all the inhabitants of the world to accept the commandments of Bnei Noach. Why? What does that mean? In order for the service of a noahide in fulfilling the commandments is appropriate, you really want to serve God, he, the non-Jew, cannot rely on his own reasoning. Why? Because their own reasoning, their rational soul, might lead them to coarseness. Look again, 80 years ago, Europe, Nazis, Imach Shemam, their name should be erased. They were very smart. They were not crazy people, very smart people. But their intellect led them to coarseness, and again, everybody knows what we're talking about, I assume. So how can a non-Jew actually fulfill his commandments appropriately and serve God the way God wants? It must be connected to the Jew. Because the Jew has a divine soul, and that takes the person up, so to speak, inclined towards serving God, and etc., beyond whatever a person might understand. That makes, look at these words, are very, you have to understand, again, this is 1977, as we mentioned before, nobody was talking about this in the whole Jewish world. Forget it. Who cares about the non-Jews? Didn't you see what they did to us a few years ago? Like 77 is like 30 years ago. Didn't you see that? Forget it. Who cares? This is like completely revolutionary, what the Rebbe is saying, and when is he saying this, etc. And how is it saying this? So, again, look at these words. When the noahide is directed by a Jew, his tselem is complete. And then he also strives up. Is it doomed to be a non-Jew that is looking down, his intellect looks down and forget it, your course, your blah, blah, blah? No. Learn Torah, guided by the proper person, the proper people, etc., in the proper way, and you'll become just looking up also. It's just that you have to go through the Jew. Why? Why the Jews? Why not the Indians? Why the Jews? Because they have a soul, a divine soul. Why? Okay, go ask God why he chose these people. That's a question I can't answer. But that's the reality, that the metzius, we say in Hebrew, that's the existence, that's what we have. So by going through the Jew, a non-Jew can also reach very, very lofty heights. Therefore, so we go back to the question, the original question. It is important to mention that beloved is in the Mishnah, beloved is man, noahides, because they have a tselem, and also that there's an additional love that God is showing, which means the tselem, the image of a Jew. Why is it important? Because the noahide must know that the perfection of their own tselem depends on the perfection of the tselem of a Jew. And the Rebbe is not saying this, but you can actually imply clearly. When the Jew refines himself or herself, whatever, then he's able to also refine the non-Jew. If the Jew starts behaving just like another person, just like a non-Jew, he's also going to be coarse. You're going to tell me you have a divine soul? Yeah. As we mentioned before, you have the potential to really reach lofty heights. Are you there? No. You're coarse. Because why? Intellect is intellect, by the Jew and by the non-Jew. You're going to tell me that the previous Rebbe said that the intellect of the Jew looks high, and the intellect, yeah, that's in potential, Because you have a soul, because you're Jewish, you have a soul, very nice. But if you're not using it, it doesn't work by itself. The Tanya, the Alter Rebbe mentions in Tanya, in chapter 18, that certain situations in life might awaken the divine soul within the Jew, and he's going to behave, so to speak, properly according to the situation. But it's just in certain situations, it's not just a given. Yeah, you're always, no, you're always nothing. Again, most of the Jews don't really keep Torah mitzvahs, don't really fulfill the commandments, etc., etc. No, I'm sorry, no. And some of them are also coarse, much worse than most of the non-Jews. Why? Because intellect is intellect. And when it gets in contact with coarseness, it gets coarse. With this, we're going to understand something very interesting in the Rambam. The Rebbe puts this into brackets because it's not the main thing, but I think it's interesting to understand. Basically, when the Rambam is explaining the laws of the non-Jews, the Bnei Noach, in his book, Mishnah Torah, etc., he brings something puzzling. He says that if a non-Jew keeps the commandments because his intellect or her intellect, it's the same, dictates that's a right thing to do, moral, ethic, etc., don't kill, don't steal, etc., etc., then he's not one wise person. This is what the Rambam says. You're not wise. You're not really, Why? Why not? Apparently, you're a wise person. Don't kill, don't steal, etc. It's fine. You have the proper information, and you're keeping it, and you're doing it, and you're teaching it. Why are you not called a wise person? You're only, says the Rambam, you're only called a wise person when you fulfill the commandments because God told Moshe in Har Sinai, in Torah, and Moshe told it to the Jewish people, and we're compelling all the non-Jews to fulfill, etc., etc. Then you're called a wise person. Why? And the Rebbe is explaining in a very simple way. Because if a person fulfills the commandment because of your own judgment, there could be a problem over here. There could be a problem of coarseness, of reaching the craziest conclusions, as we saw already in history. So then that's why the Rambam says you're not really wise if you came to the conclusion of don't kill, don't steal, etc. No, that doesn't mean wise. No, that's a worldly thing. Everybody would do it because it makes sense. When are you really wise? When you keep this because the Torah says, and God gave this to Moshe Rabbeinu in Mount Sinai, etc. That really makes a wise person. Why? Because his intellect gets really upgraded, so to speak, because it's connected to the intellect of the Jew, and the intellect of the Jew is connected to his divine soul. So everybody gets upgraded, so to speak, by this connection. At the end, I'm not going to explain the whole thing. I prefer give room to questions. I assume you can read it by yourself. At the end, the Rebbe is talking about the body of the Jew, that the fact that God chose the Jewish people, that gets expressed in his body, not necessarily in his soul, because the soul is a part of God. So God is not really choosing himself, so to speak. He's choosing something else, quote unquote. There's nothing else but God, but that's why I'm not reading this thing. It's a deeper thing, and I don't think it's going to really make any change, any difference on what we're learning right now. The main point of this whole talk of the Rebbe is, again, the non-Jews get elevated into very lofty heights by being connected to Jews, by learning from Jews, by learning Torah in the proper guidance. That makes their own intellect not be so influenced by the world, so to speak, the coarseness of the world, etc., just like the intellect of the Jew. By the Jew is not such an avoid, it's not such a work, and it's not such a merit, because God gave him the soul. What do you want from me? I didn't do anything. I was just born, whatever, conversion, whatever the case is. By the Jew, it's an avoida. It's a work. By the non-Jew, it's a work. And it sometimes takes time, and sometimes it's difficult, etc. But the reward, so to speak, in fulfilling yourself and really becoming complete by yourself is so strong and so high that it's something you should actually strive for.